Hello and welcome to Futuroscope on the outskirts of Poitiers and to the 87th running of the Tour de France. Well, over these past few years especially, this event has delighted, occasionally disappointed, shocked and surprised us. And there's no reason to think now, as we go into the next 23 days of racing, things will change. The greatest annual sporting event is about to go on the roads of France. Yes, indeed, and we can expect more fireworks before Paris on July the 23rd. The race this year is over 3,600 kilometres, and after the time trial here in Futuroscope, we have the return of the team time trial on Tuesday. Next week we are in the Pyrenees, and in the final week we cross the difficult Alps en route for the traditional finish on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. Last Thursday the stars appeared. A fit and indeed slim Jan Ullrich walked tall, affording perhaps private thoughts of a second Tour win. The tiny climber Marco Pantani affording a smile after a fraught 12 months of little competition, yet cannot be discounted. And a relaxed defending champion as American Lance Armstrong breezed into town ready for action. But he's well aware how important a good start is in the time trial opening.
The first day is an opportunity to take what I consider to be serious time, because it's 16 kilometers, you're looking at 18, 19 minutes. That's a chance on some climbers to take close to 2 minutes.
So Lance is the last to start of the 180 riders, and we can now go to the action in this Thursday time trial. In the commentary box with me is Paul Sherwood. So the arrival of David Miller as he lines up for the finish here now. He's set the best time at midway through the course. Is he going to produce the surprise now for Great Britain? There it is, a one against the leader on the board. Miller is in with a chance here now. It's not going to be by very much. It's a long way up this home straight. Miller is challenging the long-time leader of the former world champion, Laurent Jalabert. His first Tour de France. Can he do what Chris Boardman did and go out with a win in the opening day and claim a leader's yellow jersey? We're going to know very shortly now, because a lot of riders have finished, only a few to start as Miller comes up to the line. He's got the target, 19 minutes and 3 seconds. Now the rest having all to do, Miller has set down the best time. Well, Paul, that was an outstanding ride by Miller, and one we expected, I think.
Well, I expected him to get high, Phil. Many people really felt that this man could finish in the top 10, but to put the fastest time in so far is really quite remarkable. Out on the course, though, Ullrich has now gone in at the second time check here with the same time as Jalabert and Miller as well.
And this is on the climb of the Côte de Journée climb, which is a 3.7% 1 kilometre climb, and there's nothing in it here between the top three. Now, the winner of 1 year ago, Lance Armstrong, makes his depart. He started winning in the first event last year.
Well, in fact, you notice Armstrong is not wearing the yellow jersey as defending champion from last year, because this stage today, Phil, has been classified as a stage, not as a prologue. It's 16.5 kilometers long. Armstrong is out on course, and he's trying to go out there and rival the times of David Miller.
We're swinging around a bit now, and we're back here to number 57, Abraham Olano. As Jan Ullrich, the world time trial champion, there's a little bit of a nasty surprise. He's caught Marco Pantani.
Well, Pantani didn't start off very well in the prologue a couple of years ago today, and for him, the first week is trying to survive, trying not to lose too much time. The next man we're looking at here is Alex Zülle, and you can see nowadays all of these bicycles resembling what the Union Cycliste Internationale regard as bicycles. You know, though, I have to say, Phil, Ullrich is looking very strong.
He is looking very strong, and the likes of Zülle is losing seconds, not just to Ullrich, but also to David Miller, who is still the leader back at the finish. Now, one man I thought might have challenged Miller is Christophe Moreau, and he's not going to get even near, conceding more than a minute there as he comes in 24th at the moment. Now look at this. At the 8-kilometre check, Miller best through there as well, and he's still looking good. Armstrong running him close.
Well, 3 seconds at the moment. David Miller is the fastest time at the 8-kilometre time check out on the course. 6 seconds ahead of Jalabert. Ullrich now, Phil, closing in on the line.
Jan Ullrich is looking extremely good and has surprised many by how fit he really is looking now. Mr. Pork Pie, they used to call him just a couple of months ago. He's had a reasonable Tour of Switzerland where he was the race leader, but he seemed to me to let that race run away from him. But now he's home and Ullrich is in, and a good ride. 19:17 his time. The arrival of Pantani will be considerably slower.
An awful long way down, but that's not what is important for Marco Pantani. It's the rest of this Tour de France. Abraham Alano is the next man to come to the line, and he too, Phil, has faded over the last few kilometres.
Another former world time trial champion will not be happy with his opening stage of the Tour de France. The 16.5 kilometres, and that is at 19:42 for him.
Well, he really has faded over the latter part, but this man is at the moment rivaling the time of David Miller. Miller is already in with the best time so far. Another man on the start line this year, Michele Bartoli. Good ride by him, Phil, inside the top 15.
New champion of Italy, by the way, just won his title just on a week ago. As we're now looking at the legs here of Lance Armstrong, and he is running very, very close to Miller's time now. And realistically, Paul, this man is the only rider now who can stop Miller winning, because here's the arrival of Alex Zülle. And for a man who has won the prologue time trial in the past, which this is a little bit further, of course, it's not a great ride for Zülle, but he comes in 4th just now.
Losing 20 seconds on David Miller's time, but this is the last man who can beat him. Lance Armstrong has posted great times out on the course, Phil, coming up to the line. That is the time to beat. And in fact, at the 13-kilometre time check, they're saying Armstrong was ahead.
This has come to a sprint to the line here, and Lance Armstrong could well be doing the ride of his life to win the first stage and take the race leader's yellow jersey. It is all on this finish here as he comes up the straight in Futuroscope, but it's going to be desperately close now. There's the leading time of Miller. It survived all day as Armstrong 1 second down and a few kilometres to go. Is he going to build on that, or is he going to slow down? And he isn't going to do it, Paul. David Miller has won, and Lance Armstrong will finish second.
Well, that is amazing. Over the last few kilometres, Armstrong slowed, and it would allow David Miller, the early starter, to take out the victory by a mere 2 seconds over the defending champion.
Well, the big pumping legs of the defending Tour champion Lance Armstrong, his form definitely coming good at the Dauphiné, as he now looks forward to 3 weeks on the road in the Tour de France. But he must be a little bit surprised by the ride of the British rider from Cofidis, David Miller, one of the youngest riders in the race, and coming to the first Tour de France, and he gets the victory over Lance Armstrong. Still, there's no doubt that Armstrong has laid down the gauntlet here for others to see. Look at this now. It's a good start for your defence. Just 2 seconds off the win. Jalabert taking 3rd place. But in his first Tour de France, David Miller has done what Chris Boardman has done in the past and pull on the leader's yellow jersey. So this was a superb ride by David Miller, the first leader of the Tour de France. A powerhouse all of the way, as he thumped around quite a difficult course here at the theme park of Futuroscope on the outskirts of Poitiers. And now it's off, and a round of applause from the race director, Jean-Marie Leblanc. 12:10 in the morning, Futuroscope to Loudun now, 194 kilometres, and David Miller in the yellow jersey. How does he feel? Well,
he must feel absolutely fantastic, but such a slim margin, Phil, just 2 seconds and out on the course. There are time bonuses, and as you can see, an excellent day today. A 20-kilometre wind from the southwest and 24 degrees Celsius. These guys will enjoy their racing today.
And 3 riders not allowed to start the Tour de France, by the way, yesterday. Sergei Ivanov, the champion of Russia, and Houtman, and also Rossano Brassi with the 2 high hematocrit levels. Breakaway here, this is Eric Decker, and who else but Jackie Duron, the Lanterne Rouge of the Tour de France last year. They are out on the attack.
Well, out on the attack, Jackie Duron, not only was he last year in the Tour de France, he was voted the most aggressive bike rider of the Tour de France.
And he deserved the title too, but Eric Decker, having ridden the Tour of Italy, also there in that breakaway. And we said only to Jackie Duron during the medical test that he really, we wished him well on his lone escapes. Here is the sprint at Châteauroux at 138.5 kilometres now. The field more or less racing for 3rd place because they're a couple of minutes behind, and David Miller, the cheek of it, is going to take himself a 2 second time bonus. Now that's a little bit of a turn up for the books. A 2-minute gap because Decker's already gone through with Jackie Durand as they continue on the way. There's the result of the sprint. Well, one big man missing from the race this year is the sprinter, Big Mario himself. Let's go now to Gary Imlach, who'll update us on that.
Chippo's absence will be significant, less for the lack of costume changes and dodgy publicity stunts we're going to see, as for the effect it'll have on his perennial rivals in the first week sprints. Robbie, no Cipollini this year.
No, it's sad, eh?
Robbie McEwen said it, everyone else just thought it. Beating your rivals is one thing. Doing it dressed as Caesar could be construed as taking the post-race urine sample. Anyway, McEwen, who won last year's final sprint on the Champs-Élysées, is just one of a bunch who'll be jockeying to take Mario's place on the podium during the flat opening stages. The Estonian sprinter Jan Kirsipuu won the first stage last year and held on to the yellow jersey for a week. Belgium's Tom Steels won the next two, then got disqualified to hand Cipollini the first of his record-breaking 4 in a row. He has to be considered the leading contender. Jeroen Blijlevens of Holland was averaging a stage a year before missing the race last year. And the senior member of the bunch is Germany's Erik Zabel with 7 career wins, although the last was in '97. But although they may be happy to see Mario go, there are mixed feelings about the loss of the big red Saeco train that used to deliver him to the finish and keep the race under control in the process.
It's going to make a big difference, I know, because it was the only team with a lot of experience, and all the riders, yeah, they were used to it now. And now it's going to be difficult to control the bunch for the last kilometers now.
I think this year we have a more open situation in the race, so it's hard, especially for my team, to control the bunch.
Of course, less control means more danger in a race that already has the most dangerous sprints in the world.
It's going to be some difficult sprints, I think. In the Tour they're always a little bit over the edge, I think, but now if there's only one team that is trying to control the last 10 kilometers, it isn't much. So let's hope that we can survive it.
Well, whoever wins today, it's unlikely they'll be using the opportunity to dress up as a Roman emperor at tomorrow's stage start. Although Chippo's latest uniform violation actually consists of getting his kit off altogether in an advert for a shoe manufacturer. Anyway, the key thing for Cofidis and David Miller is that it's a nice bunch sprint today with a bit of glory for the fast men and no change in the overall classification.
Well, I'll tell you what, Gary, that's exactly how it's going to work out now, because it looks, Paul, as we run down to the finish here at Loudun, that the Telecom team again are trying to bring their man to the front, Erik Zabel.
1,000 metres at the last kilometre for these riders now, but you can see the organisation is not here with the absence of Mario Cipollini. The pink and white jerseys on the front are for Erik Zabel, but on the right-hand side, the Mapei riders are also trying to line it up. There is Paolo Bettini taking the line around the corner first, looking over his shoulder. Robbie McEwen is right in there as well, and so is Stuart O'Grady.
Well, the first stage for the sprinters of the Tour, they've averaged 40.5 kilometres an hour today to keep this race together now. But Paolo Lanfranchi it is who swings off the front, and the Telecom boys are now looking around for Zabel. Tom Steels is in there, but not looking too content at all as they now move up towards the line here now. And it is Gian Matteo Fanini who again is looking to lead out Zabel. This is the man who was brought over from the Cipollini Seiko team this year, and Zabel is now in a perfect position here as they run towards the line. But Tom Steels has pushed his way out of the pack there. Roman Veinstein's on his wheel as Fanini launches Zabel for the line. This is going to be a very tight sprint because we've also got Stuart O'Grady in there as well as he comes on the left of our picture. But I think on the line, Steels has stolen it from O'Grady and Erik Zabel. But that was a royal sprint with all of them desperate for the first big win of the Tour.
Very nervous sprint as well, Phil. We saw a lot of arms and legs coming out of the way there as everybody tried to go forward. Marcel was caught in the middle there as well, almost losing it. This is the lead out here. You see there, almost losing it. Tom Steels comes right around Fanini, loses a lot of impetus. Veinstein's moving up around the outside as well, but once he gets the acceleration going, it's all the way to the line for Tom Steels. There in the middle was Wust in the King of the Mountains jersey, a lead that he took in the opening time trial, and Stuart O'Grady on the inside by the back barriers, Phil, throws it at the line, but just a little bit too late.
Well, O'Grady will be quite pleased because he's aiming for the green jersey that Erik Zabel has won for these past 4 years, and that's a good start for the Australian, getting second. Tom Steele said before the start of the tour he'd be content with one stage win, so now I guess he can be content. Marcel Wust, by the way, wearing the King of the Mountains jersey there. He finishes 5th here because he was the best time in the time trial up the small climb. He went out in the time trial just to be the best time there and then eased back as he raced towards the finish. But he's got himself a jersey to wear. There is the confirmation of that result.
Well, that was a great result, but you know, because the time trial was so long, Phil, there's been no real change in the overall standings. O'Grady and Zabel very happily up there in 2nd and 3rd place, but the next sprints are announcing that they're going to be fairly aggressive. The overall standings, you can see Lance Armstrong losing a couple of seconds there, 4 seconds behind David Miller. Laurent Jalabert 15 seconds back, but for David Miller, it's another day in the yellow jersey, out on the roads, a title he hopes to keep hold of, Phil, until we get to the team time trial in a couple of days' time.
Welcome to stage 3 now of the Tour de France. The riders heading for Nantes and into Western France. Well, yesterday David Miller found the true value of having a strong team about him. He'll expect the same again today. One thing's for sure, he's not overwhelmed by wearing the leader's yellow jersey, as he told Gary Imlach.
Everybody in the bunch is coming up and saying well done, and it gives like having a VIP pass when you're in the bunch. You just go wherever you want and do whatever you want. Everyone lets you through and life's a lot easier basically. Plus I got a whole team riding up front, so I don't have to do much.
And at least one more day of it before the team time trial.
Yeah, I think it's no problems.
Well, that's certainly very confident, Phil. No problems, because there are always problems out on the roads of the Tour de France. The yellow jersey of Miller alongside the King of the Mountains jersey of Wust. The green jersey on the shoulders of Tom Steele. The white jersey at the moment, well, that is a jersey that is being worn by the best young rider in the Tour de France, and it's the first time it's actually been reintroduced after an absence of many years. That, for the moment, is being worn by David Cañada.
And there's the weather today, very low wind speed, 15 kilometers an hour coming in from the southwest. We are racing actually in a westerly direction today, so it's going to help them a little bit, I think. Glorious day here as we race now towards Nantes and the coast, and the riders, there's Tom Steele already in green, the jersey of course which Erik Zabel wants, and Zabel has plenty of time yet.
Well, there's going to be a big competition for the green jersey because Stuart O'Grady, the Australian, has already announced that that's the title he wants to take back to Sydney, that he wants to ride around the streets when he's going to defend and try and get himself an Olympic gold medal.
Stewie is still the only Australian ever to have worn that jersey, which he had done briefly. Now, this is Jens Voigt here in the green, Freddy Agricole, and with him is Michael Blaudsen of the memory card Jack and Jones team. They've been away. They got away at the 27th kilometre, but they are now all back together. It's been a long chase down, but you know, Paul, we're heading up here for possibly another sprint finish now.
Well, they had a maximum advantage of over 6 minutes at one stage, but you know, it's a strange tour the opening couple of days so far, because with the absence of Mario Cipollini from the race, none of the sprinters at the moment, Phil, really seem to want to control the race. We saw a lot of work done early on by David Miller's Cofidis team, but the big teams for tomorrow's team time trial, the ONCE squad, the US Postal Service team, they've been completely absent, but coming into the streets of town, it is all together.
It's a nasty approach into Nantes. There's one or two tricky little bends. The field is all together as they get under 2 kilometres to go there now. And that's the sort of example of the traffic furniture put down in the French streets now. It causes quite a few problems. And this peloton is absolutely flying now. It looks like Freddy Rodriguez on the front.
Half a dozen riders gone down there, Phil, right in the middle of the road. Some of the sprinters have gone down there. On the yellow jersey is David Miller. He too has been caught out by that accident.
Well, it was some sort of ricochet crash, a touch of wheels in the middle, and down has gone a La Française de Jeux rider. Miller is on the side of the road there. Now, we're not inside the last kilometre, Paul, which means he is losing time. He's got to get back.
Well, his teammate is right up there alongside him. He's going to have to get back very quickly. This is Markus Zerberg on the floor, the new champion of Switzerland. He doesn't look too good for the moment. He looks as if he might have a problem with his collarbone. But for David Miller, the important thing is to try and get onto the back of the main field. But that crash may well have caused a small split.
Well, this is a desperate chase now for Miller to get back on. Jean-Patrick Nazon was the rider who seemed to cause the accident. His teammates are waiting for him, but Miller's not waiting for them. That is a very fine piece of riding because he is tacked on here. It's taken him about half a mile, that's all. At the front end now, the sprint is starting. Miller is on the back end of the bunch, but I do believe the bunch is slightly split. Stefan Westerman here now, and on his wheel is Freddie Rodriguez, the new champion of the United States, trying to mix in. Rodriguez now looking for Tom Steels. He's in the green jersey, but there's a couple of lead-out men lining up for Steels now, and this could be a very good approach, because I think that's Fanini in second place, Tom Steels in third, Zabel's got a good wheel in fourth, and so too Stuart O'Grady is lined up. Once again a sprint royale here as the riders head up towards the line now, and they're trying to launch Tom Steels here to the finishing line. Surely he is not going to make it too. Look at the face of Steels as Steels comes off the wheel of Fanini now. Zabel has got him lined up on his shoulder as Marcel Vos comes on the right of our picture, but no doubt about it, Paul, Tom Steels has done it again.
He's got a big thank you there to say to Stefano Zanini. I didn't think he was ever going to come past his Italian teammate there. He was at full speed right on the wheel, but he was holding back and waiting. This is a very difficult sprint to judge. You can see how long it is. The important thing now, though, Phil, looking back down this line, is to see just where is David Miller and the yellow jersey. There was a split at the front of that main field. What we have to know now is, was Lance Armstrong in the front? There's Miller, the yellow jersey of Miller coming in at the rear end of this bunch, and it's going to be a long time for him to count and see if he's going to keep that yellow jersey, because at the start of the day his advantage was a mere 4 seconds.
Well, in fact, Paul, the first 25 riders have been given a 9-second advantage over the Miller group, but that will not lose in the lead, because in fact in that group was also Armstrong, so he will keep his race leader's yellow jersey. Ullrich was paying attention though, because he was in the front split.
Well, Ullrich being very attentive, and I have to say, I think Jan Ullrich is in excellent form there. The grey-haired gentleman talking to David Miller is his team manager, Alain Bondu, a former 2-time champion of the world. And here is confirmation of that stage result, Phil. Steels ahead of Vust and Zabel. The big sprinters are all there. Jans Koorts in 4th place, Stuart O'Grady in 5th.
And there's the confirmation of the overall. Armstrong now second at 4 seconds, Jalabert 6. Ullrich closes in to 4th place now, 7 seconds back. And the race now making ready for the team time trial today as we leave Nantes, heading for Saint-Nazaire. It's a 70-kilometre team time trial reintroduced into the race, but before they get to the start, David Miller can smile. The French are saying, well, he is a little bit dandy, which is a fine English phrase, and he says, yes, I am, and enjoying it. But how this crash almost robbed him of the yellow jersey, and what great courage he's shown and sense of positioning as well to get back on his bike and save the day. He's now achieved his ambition, Paul. He started the team time trial in yellow, but the Cofidis team here have done a ride. The best team in is Crédit Agricole. Cofidis are going to come in at best third.
Well, this has been a very difficult race, you know, 70 kilometres. A lot of the teams have been built specifically for this team time trial, which has been reintroduced this year. Miller has looked strong throughout, although his team have lost 1 or 2 riders over the last climb of the day, the Pont de Saint-Nazaire. Miller's going to lead them over in the yellow jersey. They will lose some time, but Phil, the best teams are still to come.
They are. There are still 4 teams to come. Telecom, Festina, Once and US Postal, who are leading the team, so they get to start last. David Miller has done his best there with what we think is a reasonably good ride, but it won't be good enough, I don't think, to give him the leader's yellow jersey for another day. This is the next team in, Zabel's team, and they're racing for different reasons right now. They're racing now to put Jan Ullrich right up on the leaderboard.
Well, basically, the way the race is at the moment, Phil, any one of these teams that gets first man across the line is going to look at getting the new yellow jersey in their squad. Deutsche Telekom are going to push Crédit Agricole out of the first position. What a great ride. Vinokourov is up there in first position. Jan Ullrich is safely in this group at the moment. And Deutsche Telekom, Phil, are going to come in here with the fastest time, the new best time on the day.
Well, the faces on these guys says it all, because the ride over the bridge, and we'll see it shortly, is so difficult. It's causing a lot of teams to fragment up there. There's Ullrich on the left of our picture, and they're set fair here for the best time. They're just going to creep inside Crédit Agricole, 1:27.01. Let's go out to the bridge now and look at US Postal, and Lance Armstrong is having to slow down to regroup the team.
Well, they're having a hard time keeping all together. This is Frankie Andreu riding the Tour de France for the 9th time, Phil, in succession. The greatest thing an American has ever done at the Tour de France, and Frankie has ridden and finished every one of his tours so far. Armstrong now is having to slow down for the rest of the team here, because the time counts on the 5th man across the line. He cannot ride away on his own to prove how powerful he is. He's got to wait for the team.
Well, at all of the time checks so far, Once, who are in front here of US Postal and heading for the finish, are setting the best markers. And US Postal have been 3 seconds behind at the first check and 13 seconds behind at the next. They're just slipping away slightly. That's the latest now. Once are still the best. Deutsche Telekom in second.
But Once, Phil, here we are looking at them now. I've got all riders together. There's still 9 men. Look at this speed, over 50 kilometers an hour at the moment. The white jersey in that group was Cañada. This now is the US Postal Service team. They are down to 6 riders. And look at Tyler Hamilton wearing number 4 at the back of the group here. He's all over his machine. He's trying to stay in contact. This is the man who earlier this year won the Dauphiné Libéré, and they are losing time, 38 seconds behind Once, but they are ahead of Team Deutsche Telekom.
Well, Once are now heading into the finish, and here they come. David Cañada is the rider in the white young jersey at the moment. That's another reintroduction into the Tour this year. Now, this is going to be the best time because it's been indicated throughout the course. Now, it'll set the marker for US Postal to follow. The clock stops on the 5th man, 1:25.35. That is the time, and a whisker under 50 kilometers an hour.
All 9 men, that was the important thing. They saved themselves over the final few kilometers to keep the 9 men there, and in the last 10 kilometers, that is what counts, to have a full team working together. The face of Laurent Jalabert there in the middle tells it all, as does that of Abraham Alano coming across the line right now. This is the time of reference for the US Postal Service, but there's no organization at all in this team now, Phil. They are all over the place.
This team was looking extremely fluid till they started the climb of the Pont de Saint-Nazaire, and since then they've been a little bit ragged. They know they've got to finish 5 men. 1 or 2 of their riders have been openly struggling, including Tyler Hamilton. Now they are racing to finish second team here, and they may not concede too much to the Once. The Once, of course, carrying 2 possible candidates there for victory in Laurent Jalabert and Abraham Alano, but they would like to score over the Telecom team at least. Now here they come as they're being led up to the finishing line by Big George Hincapie and Racing Ekimov in second wheel here. Remember, they're trying to bring home the defending Tour champion to keep him high in the overall classification. Well, as we said, they're not going to match the Once Deutsche Bank, but they have got second, conceding 46 seconds. George takes off his helmet.
Well, I think they'll be reasonably happy with that. They knew they had to beat Deutsche Telekom. They may well not be too worried about Abraham Alano and Laurent Jalabert, but for this team, they were in serious difficulty, Phil, over that Pont de Saint-Nazaire. But this out on the course was a serious incident. The Once team were actually waiting for their man to get onto the back of the group here, and this is Marcos Serrano wearing number 59, a man who could feature highly when we get to the mountains. The team car here has come alongside. Now, bear in mind, the wind is coming from the left-hand side. The race referees have decided to give every man in the team a 20-second time penalty.
Well, I'm afraid that was a shrewd move, but he might have saved more than 20 seconds because he was able to get him back in the group. And this happened to the Once team about 3 kilometers after the start. There was a number of workers here protesting about the closure of a local disco and made a deliberate attempt to stop the team. They didn't even hesitate, although they're saying they lost maybe 10 seconds. But they still won the day, finishing 26 ahead of US Postal in the end, a minute 6 over Telecom and Ullrich, and 1:12 over Crédit Agricole with Bobby Julich and Jonathan Vaughters in that. The yellow jersey changes shoulders, and now it is a Frenchman in the leader's yellow jersey, and Laurent Jalabert is back once and for all. Cañada is in second place, Armstrong has dropped to third, Abraham Alano is now in fourth. Marcos Serrano did well to hang on because now he is up into 8th place overall, Paul.
Well, the team time trial certainly has formed the top of the overall standings for the next few days, and I don't expect that, Phil, is going to change very much on the stage from Vannes to Vitré, a fairly flat course.
Fairly flat course indeed as we're heading out, as we continue now a right inland again from Vannes. We just moved up the coast from Saint-Nazaire for a lovely start here at 12:40 in the afternoon in France. And the days have not been really hot and sunny, but they have been quite pleasant at the moment. And the new man on the block, Laurent Jalabert, didn't ride the Tour de France last year, and just that scant 12 seconds. And not surprisingly either, all of the Telecom boys are claiming a lot of the overall classifications now.
Well, the strange thing is, Phil, in the morning press they had said they weren't going to defend the overall lead, but we have seen a lot of Once on the front of this main field. Well, the weather has changed, the rain has come down, it's still fairly warm at 23 degrees Celsius, and still the wind a slight problem, 20 kilometers an hour from the southwest.
Well, I shouldn't have mentioned the weather, Paul. As usual, of course, it does what the commentator says it won't do. We've had a little bit of a shower now. They're quite heavy storms when they pass through. As we come to the sprint now at Mohan, 52 kilometers covered. And Jens Voigt on the attack again here with Sebastian Demarbe. And in fact, these two riders, Paul, have got away again, and Voigt lining himself up for the most aggressive rider. The main field is only just behind, 15 seconds back at the moment.
Well, there's David Miller. He started the Tour off in the yellow jersey. He's now down in 24th place overall. And Marcel Wustville is the king of the mountains, which really is quite humorous for him because he really has a hard time going over even the slightest mountain on this course.
Well, Marcel's last Tour de France, by the way, was in 1992, so at least he's back here as we continue on now to the Eriac sprint. And again, a little breakaway here with Koos Moenhout going through. But what about the man who is in the overall lead? He's still sat back in that main field, doesn't seem too keen on trying to stop these attacks today as we course through these beautiful villages on the Île-et-Vilaine in France. As we race across the Côte d'Amour and onto the Île-et-Vilaine, let's go to Gary Imlach now, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the return of Laurent Jalabert to the Tour de France.
So the French have their first yellow jersey for 2 years, and joy should be unconfined throughout toute la belle France. Things are never that straightforward on the Tour, though, and this yellow jersey belongs to a Frenchman who lives in Switzerland, rides for a Spanish team, and has a very complicated relationship with his home race. Laurent Jalabert started life in the Tour as a sprinter, and almost finished it the same way.
Nelson goes on the left, the rest are following. Martinelli is here too for the Polti team as they come up towards the line. Nelson is taking, and they've gone one after the other. They've hit the barriers. Nelson was not looking where he was going.
That crash in 1994, the fault of a policeman who stepped out into the road to take a photo, put Jalabert out of action for months. When he'd recovered, he was a different rider. The top speed was lower, but the fuel economy was up. He'd become an all-rounder. On his return to the Tour the following year, he took the yellow jersey on stage 2. But although he'd changed, his luck apparently hadn't.
They realise that Mario Cipollini has got a chance to win this stage, and it looks today as if it will go. And there's somebody gone down in the corner.
Oh, my goodness me. That was the roundabout we were warned about, and they've gone straight on into the barriers.
And I have a feeling, Phil, there it may well be the yellow jersey went down there. Laurent Jalabert was the yellow jersey on the right-hand side. He's outside the 1 kilometre sign, so it may well be he's going to lose it today.
That crash, no police officers implicated, lost him the yellow jersey. But that year he wore the green of the points competition winner, won a stage in Mende on Bastille Day, and finished 4th overall, his best ever Tour. Jalabert went on to be national champion, world #1, and along with Richard Virenque, one of the twin heroes of French cycling. Virenque flash and flamboyant, Jalabert stoic, almost Jurassic, a rider out of the old mould, which made the events of 1998 all the more traumatic for him and his fans. Unlike Virenque, Jalabert was never implicated in the drugs scandal that engulfed the '98 Tour. But he was a spokesman for the riders who felt harassed by the police tactics, and eventually he left the race in disgust along with his Once teammates. Afterwards, he fell out badly with the French cycling establishment, snubbing the national championships last year and boycotting the Tour. Tempers have cooled since then. This year, Jalabert's back, and he's taken the second yellow jersey of his career. This one, though, is perhaps less as an individual French rider than as the leader of a foreign team.
C'est presque plus important que quand on gagne tout seul. Je crois que c'est un collectif qui gagne et ça va donner le moral à tout le monde. Et je pense que c'est parti pour nous, pour que ce soit un grand tour.
Well, there he is, and he's riding his 9th Tour de France, Laurent Jalabert now, and looking pretty cool in the race leader's jersey. He could take this all the way down to the Pyrenees, you know. The gap is 1 minute and 32 seconds, Paul. The breakaway really having got away today with that attack by Jens Voigt and Demarbe after about 51 kilometres. But they're just hanging on here now, and the bunch, they don't look round because they're almost up behind them.
This is unbelievable. Decker's the man in first position there. Jens Voigt is the man in second position, and the sprint is led up the front there by the pink and white jerseys of the Telecom team of Eric Zabel. These guys, Phil, have been trying to hold on to the slenderest of advantages, and it's coming down. It's going to go down to the last few hundred metres.
The two survivors of a 5-man breakaway, and the finish is in sight. The unfortunate thing is it's a long straight road, and as you can see, it is also slightly uphill, and again it is Fred Rodriguez, the US champion, who's doing so much hard work, and I think this time they've got them.
Well, Voigt looks over his shoulder there. Freddie Rodriguez out of the saddle now. This man has really become a top professional this year, Phil. He digs deep for him. The sprint is to the back wheel of Eric Decker, and then he will swing off and lead it all up to Team Telecom. In second position is Gian Matteo Fanini. On his wheel is Zabel. Right in there is the green jersey of Steels.
Well, as they come up towards the line now, it's going to be a very tight sprint indeed, this one. But again, Fanini is giving Zabel a perfect lead out. Steels is running behind, and Steels also got his lead out man. But on the left of the picture, Zabel, and Wuster's gone across there now. Marcel Wuster, who's never won a stage of the Tour, I think he's about to change it because he's got the measure of Zabel. So he's had a third, a second, and now he's got his first ever stage victory.
Absolutely unbelievable. What a dangerous sprint though. Fanini moving across the road there, just sitting up as soon as he'd launched Eric Zabel into his attack. But this man winning the leader's jersey of the King of the Mountains competition, Phil, he's going to have a real laugh about that.
Well, he's had some regular appearances on the podium, if it's only to get a new King of the Mountains jersey every day, because we've had no mountains to contest since the prologue time trial. But look at the way he realised that Zabel had got the jump over Tom Steels on this occasion, dived across to the right, picked up the German's wheel, and this is a German 1-2, and the history books show that a very, very few German 1-2s ever recorded in a stage finish of the Tour de France. It's unfortunate. Zabel would have liked it to have been the other way around, and in fact Stefano Zanini, the lead-out man for Steels, finished in front of him and got the third place. Can you believe that?
Looking at the face of Steels there, he wasn't happy with his sprint today. The confirmation of Wustsvin ahead of Zabel, Zanini third and Tom Steels fourth. But what a great job done there by Freddie Rodriguez, the US champion.
And a bunch sprint, and this is how you do it when you want to win a sprint. But there's a little confusion as to which domestique was leading out whom on this occasion. But even so, they found the right winner in the end, because Marcel was absolutely delighted with that sprint victory, the first ever in a Tour de France. But the long breakaway today, Jens Voigt was part of it, and he really was the hero of the day, I think, and so does Paul.
Jens, that was so close.
Yeah, today I was really disappointed, because it looked really like, just until the very last end, it looked really, really good for us, and I really thought we could make it, but finally they just get us like it happens almost.
Oh, that's a shame, because Jens Voigt is really a very aggressive rider in this year's Tour. This man cannot believe this opening few days of the Tour de France. He's never come off the podium. Marcel Wust getting the winner's prize, but Laurent Jalabert keeping the maillot jaune. No change overall at all, with the big field coming down that home straight all together there. So Jalabert ahead of Cañada, and Lance Armstrong looking extremely good in third place. There's the kisses from the young ladies in yellow. And Laurent Jalabert salutes the crowd here. He is still a very popular figure here, especially in this part of France, which is a cycling hotbed. On to stage 6 now, 198 kilometres, saying goodbye to Vitre and on to the famous cycling city of Tours. And sadly, with 80 kilometres to go, Paul, this crash involving Stuart O'Grady.
Well, that's bad news for the Australian. He's looking like a serious candidate for the green jersey, which has been Eric Zabel's for the last 4 years. But the way he was holding his shoulder there, Phil, I do happen to think that he has got a problem with his collarbone.
Yes, it doesn't look good at all, in fact, and the Lanterne Rouge so far is also in trouble. Mateos, he doesn't look too good either. But the riders slowly are getting themselves underway, and Stuart O'Grady looking with the best part of 85 kilometres still to ride to the finish, and that might be a tough call, judging by the way he's looking. Anyway, he's underway, and as he's on his way, we can now go back again to Gary Imlach, who is now going to tell us a little other fable that he finds out about the Tour de France, and he really does dig deep for them. So let's join Gary.
Now, in American television terms, cycling has a profile somewhere between ten-pin bowling and competitive aerobics. But the Americans do love a good human interest story. So the fact that Lance Armstrong came back from cancer to win the Tour has made him a huge star. And to his credit, he's capitalised on that to raise awareness and money for the fight against the disease.
The first toast, and I would like all cancer survivors in the room to stand up.
Lance Armstrong was on his hind legs for most of the off-season, spreading the word and swelling the coffers of cancer charities, cashing in on a public profile even Greg LeMond in his heyday never had.
Because he's an inspiration to people everywhere, we chose Tour de France winner Lance Armstrong as the most fascinating person of 1999.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 1999's ESPY Comeback Athlete of the Year, Tour de France champion Lance Armstrong.
It was major for cycling, but it was also major for cancer. And I think that the combination of the two made it a story. I think had I just won the Tour de France and never had an illness like cancer, perhaps it wouldn't have been told as much. But
the Lance Armstrong comeback tour started with a parade through his hometown of Austin, Texas, continued with a ceremonial appearance for the local college football team, and finished up where all celebrity stories do, on the talk shows.
What has your life been like since then? Just nuts, I guess,
Just nuts.
Yeah.
Just basically nuts.
And just to keep life from returning to normal, a second-generation Armstrong celebrity arrived in the shape of Luke David, conceived by in vitro fertilization from sperm that had been stored before Lance's chemotherapy.
it was hectic. I mean, there were times where I really wished that I had a whole month to stay at home and just be with my family, but at the same time, I have a responsibility to the cancer community and to the cycling community to tell the story.
Not to mention the responsibility he has to himself and his family to cash in on the relatively short shelf life of an athlete's marketability, which he's been doing with ads for everything from breakfast cereal to pharmaceuticals. He even manages to get copy out of the whispering campaign conducted against him in last year's tour.
Everybody wants to know what I'm on. What am I on? I'm on my bike, busting my ass 6 hours a day. What are you on?
Now, as well as dealing with everything else, Lance, of course, is also trying to defend his title, and we'll hear from him again in a few days, talking about the race, his rivals, and especially the upcoming mountains. For the moment, though, let's go back to the race on the road.
So as we look down from the helicopter now, we're looking down on the leaders of the Tour de France, and these 12 riders are still there. The reason being the bunch has turned off again, and this breakaway now leading by about 7.5 minutes. They are set fair now to take out the stage, and the overall leader of the Tour de France will be either Alberto Elli for Deutsche Telekom or Fabrice Gugo for the Crédit Agricole, because they are split overall by just 12 seconds.
And that 12 seconds is on the finishing line, Phil, because it's 20 seconds for the first man to cross the line. But Alberto Elli is a very crafty bike rider. He knows all he has to do is keep an eye on the Crédit Agricole rider, Fabrice Gugo. And if, in fact, he finishes just in front of him, there's no problem for this man, who is almost the oldest bike rider in the race. On the front, though, you can see the acceleration is coming from Mark Wouters, the Rabobank rider, keeping the pace high. I think they're trying to sort it out for Markus Zerberg, the champion of Switzerland.
Well, the one thing's for sure now, Paul, Laurent Jalabert meant what he said when he would not defend that leader's yellow jersey, because the Once team were called off the front of the bunch, and this breakaway has virtually been away right from the start.
Well, they went after 14 kilometres, but the big advantage here is for the Rabobank team. Phil, they've got 3 riders in this breakaway, and I cannot believe a man from France in the yellow jersey has let a group go off the front. He has thrown away the lead in the bike race to the man at the moment in second position, or the man in third.
I'm not surprised at a big counter-attack coming here from Jose Luis Arrieta, and they're all now chasing him. This is one of the most famous finishing straights in the world of cycling, and Paul Schoen himself has raced down here in the Paris Tours Classic. All of these riders know this sort of finish, including Mark Wouters, who is in this breakaway because he was the winner of the last edition of Paris Tour, and he's just tailed off the back of the group now as he watches his teammate come clear. So there he is. Leon Van Bon has won the stage, and in the distance there you may have noticed the hand going up of Mark Wouters, because that was the plan, and Leon Van Bon has got the stage, but the high finishing Alberto Elli will be the new leader of the Tour de France, and really that was not expected.
It certainly wasn't, but what a great career for this man. The main field, Phil, coming in 7 minutes and 49 seconds behind, and the yellow jersey of Laurent Jalabert has disappeared from the top of the leaderboard. But what a very sad day for Stuart O'Grady. He will be taken to hospital with a suspected broken collarbone.
Well, and he's come in all the way to the finish on his bike with his arm draped over the handlebars, unable to pull on those bars. Go 7, a brave man indeed. There is the stage result, Leon Van Bon on top, and gets a second stage victory for him in the Tour de France. He won the last time in Pau in 1998. The race goes on. Hello again and welcome back to our coverage of the Tour de France. The riders on stage 7 now leaving Tours and heading to Limoges. 205 kilometres for them today, and sadly without Stuart O'Grady. And when Gary Imlach caught up with Stewie last night in his hotel, he was understandably pretty despondent.
Yeah, I knew as soon as I landed, like on my head and shoulder, that something wasn't right, and I was pretty dazed at the time, and someone just kind of picked me up and put me back on my bike, and you know, I knew straight away I couldn't even put any pressure on it, that something wasn't right, and kind of grovelled to the finish, and yeah, it's broken collarbone on the shoulder joint or something. So,
what were those last 80k like?
I just wanted to get off, but I don't know, and just kind of tell myself like, you know, just a few more K, and I couldn't pull on the bars, so every time we were coming to a little, even a speed hump, I was just getting dropped, and one of the other guys was just pushing me back on, and just, I don't know, just thinking this will finish and, you know, everything will be okay.
It's always a shame when a tough bike rider has to pull out of the Tour, but the X-rays, Phil, revealed that his collarbone was broken in 3 places, and he's now been transported to Bordeaux for a special operation.
And there's the weather, 20 kilometers per hour coming from the west today as the riders head due south, more or less away from Tours down to Limoges, so they're going to have a crosswind, but it's not that strong. The Telecom team are trying to get Zabel points at the intermediate sprint competitions, and here's the first one now at Loesch, and let's have a look if he's in the action. Well, he certainly is in the action. He's just behind the motorbike here. He gets the 6 points for the jersey. Lottie Oos is second, and Marcel Wust still challenging in that competition. He is third. So that's a good start for the Telecom, and for Zabel in particular.
Well, Erik Zabel knows how to battle for this competition, Phil. He will go out for all of the intermediary sprints and try and be consistent, as he has been over the last 4 years. But the big attempt now to make him #1 is this man's addition to the team, Gian Matteo Fanini, the former lead-out man for Mario Cipollini, and he certainly is a super asset for the team.
Well, he led out Erik Zabel indeed to the win in Milan-San Remo this year, and now we've moved on to Martin Zay at 75 kilometers, and Jackie Giron is causing a little bit of a ripple of concern here with Agneluto and Vicente Garcia Acosta next in line. So no points for Zabel, and the man who has ignored them all now and gone off on his own in the rain, this is Christophe Agneluto, former winner of the Tour of Switzerland, and now heading off in rather a dreary set of circumstances up towards the 3rd sprint here at Rusac. And his last time check, Paul, was 6 3/4 minutes ahead of the main field, so they've really allowed him his head.
Well, you know what, he may well just get France their first victory in the Tour de France since 1998, but still Erik Zabel is willing to go out and fight for more points on the road. He wants to try and get himself that green jersey, and he comes across the line nicely.
Beating Marcel Wust there, who's now out of the lead in the King of the Mountains competition. So there's the result of that. The bunch time through at precisely 6 minutes 40 seconds. So Zabel is the man of the day again. He's picked up 10 points towards the green jersey competition, but he's still not done what he dreams of doing every Tour. He hasn't won a stage, in fact, since 1997. The bunch all together, with the exception of this one rider, Christophe Agneluto, who got away at the 77-kilometer point, and his lead has gone up now to in excess of 8 minutes, and the peloton do not seem concerned with chasing him. Overall, he's 82nd, 11 minutes behind. Let's hear more about Zabel.
Last year, the green jersey competition was a straight fight between Stuart O'Grady and Erik Zabel, with the German eventually coming out on top to take an unprecedented 4th straight points title. Well, of course, Stuart O'Grady has already gone this year, sadly, and although Zabel will take no pleasure from that, it certainly increases his chances of doing what no man has ever done, either consecutively or otherwise, and that's win 5 green jerseys.
The Zabel family don't bother with pencil marks on the kitchen wall. They just put young Rick on the podium in Paris every year and let the world's photographers check how much he's grown. His dad, on the other hand, appears to have been on a sort of brilliant plateau the last few years as the Tour's most consistent rider. But really, that's not the whole picture. When Erik Zabel won his first 2 green jerseys in '96 and '97, he was out sprinting the likes of Mario Cipollini for stage wins. In the last 2, he's been shut out of the sprints, but still had enough overall strength and speed to rack up the points long after Chipo's packed his hair gel and gone home. Maintaining that kind of effort for a 5th straight year is going to be hard.
Yeah, maybe too hard.
That assessment is a combination of genuine modesty and the knowledge that the green jersey isn't his team's top priority.
We have also with Jan Ullrich, the men who have the possibility to win the Tour in overall. So
Erik may not have the whole team riding for him, but he does have some very specialised help. Last year he was second in no fewer than 4 sprint finishes, usually to Cipollini. This year, Telecom signed Chipo's lead-out man, Gian Matteo Fanini.
I think he's the best man in this position in the cycling world. And So we wait for the chance.
The chance looked like it had come a couple of days ago in the sprint at Vitre. Fagnini doing his usual kamikaze job of setting up his man and sitting up with 200 metres to go and getting in everyone else's way. Unfortunately for Eric, his fellow German Marcel Wurst was the one to profit, taking his wheel, then him in quick succession. For most of the season, though, the partnership has been working perfectly. Zabel stormed through the classics, winning the likes of Milan, San Remo and the Amstel Gold Race. As he goes for a 5th green jersey, the question is, how long can he stay that strong?
I don't know. I hope that the legs are still good enough to win, but it's also possible that I'm going too tired, and that's the tour. So we see.
Well, we'll almost certainly see Eric Zabel in contention for the stage win today because it's his 30th birthday. He'll already have told Gian Matteo Fagnini what he wants, and I don't think it'll be a record token.
Well, indeed, thanks, Gary, as we're now going back to the lone leader of the race. He's under the 10 kilometres to go banner here. His gap has come down, Paul, and he's being chased at the moment by Michael Sandstad, but he's still enormous. He's struggling now, Christophe Agneluto, but you know, he's being drawn by the fact the Frenchman hasn't won a stage of the Tour de France for 2 years.
And the last man to do that was Jackie Durand. There's confirmation of the gap. Michael Sandstad at 2 minutes 49 and the main field at 3.5. I can't really understand that maneuver by Sandstad. He's been caught in no man's land, and he's actually at the moment not actually approaching the lone leader, as he now can see on the horizon the finishing line, and he's still riding fairly well.
Just over 70 kilometres an hour on this flat piece of road here, and this is Michael Sandstad, himself a very good rider against the watch from Denmark. But as Paul has said, I think it's more a case of grabbing publicity rather than hoping. He got away with 35 kilometres to go when the gap up to the leader was 7:25. He is pulling him back, but he's pulling him back nothing like quick enough.
Well, when your gap is that big, what you really have to do is go across a gap like that in a small group of riders. At the front of the main field is controlled by US Postal Service, but victory today is going to go to France.
And he's going to enjoy this, every minute of it, because they've always said the first Frenchman to win a stage in this year's Tour is going to be remembered a big time. This is the 3rd Tour de France for Christophe Agneluto. He was 94th in 97, 31st in 98, but he's never before has featured as a stage winner. He's putting that to rights now, and he's going to go down as the first man to win a stage since 1998, and he keeps looking over his shoulder. He knows the field are closing. The last check we got, it was 1 minute and 30 seconds, and that should be clearly enough. Plenty of time to enjoy it.
Absolutely. Even Jean-Marie Leblanc, the director of the Society Tour de France, in the car behind, was out of the car as well. Happy to know that the French have broken their duck at last, because last year not one solitary stage victory.
Well, there's the clock on the right as the riders come over the top of the climb here. I think that's Anthony Moran who swings off as Cofidis look over the shoulder. Very strange bunch of sprinters here, but now Robbie McEwen's trying to break in on the action on the far left. Has all of it start to gain now, and Marcel Wurst has hit the front on the left of our picture as well. And Zabel too has come, so it's Wurst, Zabel, and it was the order over the line. Wurst, Zabel and Roman Veensteins 2, 3 and 4, but about 1 minute and 11 seconds down.
Well, that was a great sprint there by Marcel Wurst, but a great day for the French as well, Phil. Marcel Wurst, what an incredible character he is. He races all over the world, and he really is a man who has got a special talent for languages.
So there's the winner, Christophe Agneluto, 1 minute and 11 over the rest of the race today. Just a couple of riders off the back, and he is all smiles. I'm not surprised. Celebrations tonight. This man is always on the podium. He gets a green jersey now as leader of that by 3 points. And as soon as he gets down off the podium, Paul Sherwin will be with him.
It's a bit of a ding-dong battle between you and Zabel, though, because the lead actually changed sides a couple of times today.
Yeah, it's true. Eric was really flat out competing the sprints. In the first one, I just followed him, and then in the second one, I tried to come around, but I couldn't. But basically, today I had one of the worst days I had so far this year. Now I have a little throat infection. My nose is sort of blocking up. And when the team was asking me, "How do you feel? Should we bring him back?" I said no. I just said I'm really stuffed. I'm really tired. My muscles ache everywhere. So, well, finally I won the sprint, and now I'm second. So it's kind of a bummer. But you know, the tour is 3 weeks, so you don't want to really stuff up the team in the first week. It's good that the boys had a rest.
So because you weren't feeling so well, that's why the team didn't chase. But why didn't some of the other teams chase, like Marpe?
Well, I've seen Tom Steels today quite a few times, and he was not feeling much better than I was. You know, we were going backwards, both of us in the hills, and you know, the tour is like it's like the surf in Australia. It's up the waves and down the waves, and today I was really down, so it can only go up again. And this green jersey, I think it helps a little bit.
Well, what a great first week Marcel Rust is having. Alberto Elido is still in yellow, heading towards the Pyrenees. Fabrice Gugo in second place, 12 seconds down. Mark Wouters having a very, very good tour. He crashed out, remember, in the Passage du Bois last year when he broke his collarbone. So Ellie in yellow. Be careful how you say that, as he now heads off today from Limoges to Villeneuve-sur-Lot. Normally an area which is very hot and humid, but the weather is so strange this year, it's not that way at all. And David Miller in the field of 174, leaving Limoges this morning in overcast conditions, about 5 hours more in the saddle for them, on a fairly hilly ride down to Villeneuve. And one man beginning to sharpen his sprinting legs is Robbie McEwen. Here he is as we roll away.
I'm going to ride my own little Tour de France on this side of the street. See, mostly I do these little interviews during the neutral, because after they drop the flag I normally can't speak anymore. But 1 week gone, we've only had 3 bunch sprints, which is really not many. I guess there's a little bit of lack of sprinters. There's a couple missing, there's a couple sick. Tom Steels is sick. Kusapu has a problem with his back. Telecom don't really want to ride hard to keep everything together. So I think today is an even bigger chance of a group going away. Everyone's seen that Telecom doesn't want to use too much energy. So here we go again, attack, attack, attack. Hopefully someone will bring things back together.
And we're at the back of the group here now, and they're watching the leading group ride away from them. Our camera seems to be convinced that they've gone as he goes up towards the leaders here. Good split done primarily by the superb hard riding of Decker, who has just put himself on the front and kept himself going, and a question of anybody who can reach me can join me.
Well, it was the Banesto rider who made the junction. There he is. The other white jersey was Xavier Hon, but there is the counter-attack going off the front of Eric Decker. The Rabobank rider has put the hammer down completely, and he's decided he wants to make sure that this is the decisive part of this bike race.
Well, he's having a superb tour so far, Eric Decker, and determined to stick at it here as he races now, thinking of the third and final climb of the day, which is only 12 kilometers ahead of him. Well, I'm not so sure he'll survive this one, but he's taking a big gamble here, Decker, but he is a time trial champion of the Netherlands, and he's holding off the whole field. This breakaway pool of some 17 riders got away right at the start, and now Decker himself is not going to be caught. He has put the best part of a minute into the remnants of that breakaway, which has split up on the run into the finish. Well, he's ridden the Tour de France 7 times, but he has never, ever won a stage, and he is absolutely delighted. There'll be no change overall tonight because that was well controlled by the Telecom boys, but Decker doesn't care. This is a breakaway he is going to remember for the rest of his life, as he now gets ready to give a 2-armed salute here in Villeneuve-sur-Lot.
Not many bike rides get a chance to do this, Phil. A stage victory at the Tour de France, and it is a lot sweeter for this man because earlier this season in Pyrenees he broke his elbow.
Yes, and he's come back big time. I guess he softened his form up in the Giro d'Italia, and now it's come good in the Tour de France for Eric Decker. Great day out for him, by the way, because he's also taken the lead in the King of the Mountains competition. Here's the sprint now, which will be for 4th place because Rodriguez is heading up the line here, and he gets into 4th place. Behind came Xavier Yon and Garcia Acosta. They got the major places. There's confirmation of that. Have a look at the results. And there is the man in the new leader's jersey of the King of the Mountains. And again, once he stepped down off the podium, Paul Schoen was waiting for him.
What a fantastic win for you today, but to attack almost 30 kilometers from the finish must have been a pretty brave move.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a dream come true. It's my really first big win, and I'm so happy.
How was it riding down the final 500 meters there? You seem to be pretty much enjoying it.
Yeah. A few days ago, I was caught back on 400 meters to go, and I knew I needed another chance to prove that I can win a big race. And I suffered a lot this year. I broke my arm in Pyrenees, and it's unbelievable.
An emotional occasion, certainly, and why not? Eric Decker getting the biggest win of his career today. Overall, in the end, though, no change in the top 5, and Alberto Eli keeps his lead for a third day, but Jens Voigt now appears in the top 6 in 6th place. Among those who fall back for the moment at least are Lance Armstrong to 16th, Jan Ullrich to 28th, David Miller down to 40th, and Marco Pantani down to 87th. Eric Decker's win, well, hasn't really helped his overall position. Another good day, though, for Alberto Eli. Just a minor fright at the midway point when that lead was well in excess of his overall lead of the Tour, but tonight he's still on top. Hello and welcome now to stage 9 of the Tour de France. The riders pedalling their way to Dax in the southwest corner, and then they'll be in the shadow of the Pyrenees. So far, we've had 6 stage winners of the Tour, the road race legs, and they now know what it's like to join the elite band of riders who've won stages in the Tour and experienced that great emotion.
Well, the joy of victory, but you know, Phil, this is the last day before the big mountain stages, and all of these riders will be worried about that, because for the first time, the big names of the Tour de France will have to come out and play tomorrow, but still another day in the yellow jersey for Alberto Eli.
And the race now heading towards the first sprint at Nérac, all together at 23 kilometres. Not much wind blowing again today, and pleasantly warm at 24 degrees Celsius. Heading into the southwestern corner of France, just north of the Spanish frontier. And the field have made a very rapid start today, and this should be one for Zabel if he's chasing points for that green jersey, and I'm sure he is. Currently worn, though, by Marcel Wust, and Marcel is going better and better. Wust over the line first, and interestingly, Jan Kersipou second there, and Robbie McEwen of Australia getting third.
Jan Ullrich looking very concentrated before the big mountains, Phil. He's currently 28th overall, 6 minutes and 37 seconds down, but he has slimmed down a lot since we saw him racing in South Africa in the early part of the year. Also, the big question mark over Marco Pantani, 87th in the standings, but he's certainly going to fly in the mountains.
Well, he has improved from 136th, I suppose, which is what he was after the time trial. Moving on now to the second sprint at Paul Bosc. 68 kilometres in now, and this time Zabel gets the points back. Apollonio and Magnon, no sign there of Wust in the points at least.
This is an interesting move at this point as well, because the group had actually split, but the big crash is happening once again, and we can see several riders going down there, and many of them all over the road.
Well, that was a real shunt. It happened, a ricochet effect right in the centre of the field there, Paul. And as so often happens on a stage of the Tour de France, it's on a long straight road, and when the field are not racing.
Well, that's the most dangerous time. Everyone relaxes just a little bit as we come up to the next and final sprint point of the day. And now Festina completely in control, trying to set up this sprint for them, and Marcel Wust, who currently is looking very comfortable in the top of the leaderboard with the green jersey on his shoulders.
Well, let's see now, because this is a real challenge coming from Marcel Wust against Eric Zabel. 2 German riders fighting out the green jersey. It's almost unheard of in a Tour de France. Zabel is just back there with Fanini, keeping an eye on him too, as 132 kilometres is where we are now. An attack on the left there by Jackie Giron. Festina seem to be all over this race right now.
Well, Jackie Duron's stolen a march over the field here. He surprised everybody there. The response behind coming from Moreau. He's the man from the Festina squad who is actually looking for a high place in the overall standings, Phil, but I think a little despondent after a not very good performance in the opening time trial. He's onto the wheel of Durand and the sprinters started in earnest.
Well, Christophe Moreau is going to get over the top of Jackie, but that's really spoilt the sprinters at their own game with that attack. And Moreau has done well to take the points away from the Lotto rider. And in third place, Mark Wouters keeps it in the camp of Rabobank. All of the field still together.
On the run into the finish, though, this is the situation on the course. 4 riders have managed to get just off the front of the main field. Paolo Bettini is in this group. Gert Verheyen is the rider from Lotto. Jose Vidal is the Kelme rider. And Didier Roos, the man from Bonjour.
And Bonjour looking for a win here now. A French team brought into the Tour de France, and they really want to give themselves some credibility. There's Didier Roos on the far side, and the little man from Mappe, I suspect he is the most experienced here. Paolo Bettini, winner this year of Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
Well, their advantage inside the 30-second mark at the moment. All of the cars have been brought out, and in fact less than that. 11 seconds as they are now inside the outskirts of Dax, and the crowd is absolutely unbelievable. But Phil, in the main field behind, the hammer is on, and I think these guys just might get caught in the final straight.
Well, let's hope not, because it looks like we're being treated here to a carbon copy of the situation the other day when Eric Decker and Jens Voigt were swept up with about 500 meters to go. Now they are wasting time here because they are so close to the finish. Freddie Rodriguez is trying to hook up with Tom Steels. He keeps looking for him in that blue jersey. He may have him now, and Didier Roos goes underneath the Spanish Basque flag there. He starts the sprint for the line now, but that field is coming so quickly, and Bettini is gambling. But going off Bettini's wheel is Gert Verheyen in the red and Vidal in the Kelme colours. And Verheyen has started the sprint, and the speed behind is Zabel on the left and Steels as they come up to the line. Bettini is going to get it right on the line, but you know they're so close, Paul, they must get the same time.
Well, Zabel came out of nowhere there, right onto the tail of that group, and I think they will all be given the same time. A perfectly timed sprint there by Paolo Bettini, getting himself across the line ahead of Verheyen and Jose Angel Vidal. Zabel in 5th.
Well, that's the result, and it was an excellent race, but they were all given at the same time. They crossed the line together, and what a result, though, for Paolo Bettini, finally a stage winner in the Tour. This is his first Tour de France, by the way. And there is the race approaching the line. We can now go and speak with Gary Imlach.
Nice job. You seem to come to the front there and slow everything down for Paolo.
Yeah, I just got to the front, act like I was going to lead out to sprint. At the same time, I was just waiting for surges, and I just go in front of him and act like I was going to keep going, and they kept on falling for it, and there was a lot of corners, so I was able to take the front and maintain a slow speed. And then, I mean, we had confidence in Paolo Bettini that he could pull it off, and he pulled it off, so it was perfect work for today.
Sneaky.
It was sneaky, but it works.
Congratulations.
Well, I'll tell you what, he is having a marvellous Tour de France and a great season. But Alberto Eli has brought the race now down to the first big mountains of this year's Tour, leading Fabrice Gugo by 12 seconds and Mark Wouters by 1 minute and 15 seconds. Well, he wanted to lead to the Pyrenees. He's done just that, but he'll have a fight on his hands now because this is a real tough day. But no time to think about that just yet. He can collect his 4th leader's yellow jersey. The Pyrenees have awaited the Tour de France every summer since 1910, and today their angry mood promises a difficult day for most of the field. Heavy rain threatened on the Col d'Aubisque, possible snowstorms near the high peaks, and cold winds have been forecast. The Tour de France now is ready to reshape its leaderboard. 171 survived since Futuroscope 10 days ago, and their departure from Dax at 10:45 local time heralded the toughest days so far, with climbs of the Col de Marie Blanc, the Col d'Aubisque, the Col de Soulor, and the Finnish mountain of Hotekamp, enough to frighten the most experienced. Overall, it's the Italian Alberto Eli, the surprise leader for 4 days, who heads Fabrice Gugo, Mark Wouters and Pascal Chanter. But today the favourites must come forth. Names like defending champion Lance Armstrong, Spain's Abraham Olano, former winner Jan Ullrich, and our own David Miller. Who knows what little Marco Pantani will try over his favourite terrain. Hello and welcome back to our extended coverage on Tour Plus of the race in the Pyrenees today. We're at the top at Hautecam, and as you can see, despite the weather here, a large crowd waiting to see the riders come up. This will be the third time we've finished here, and without doubt this will be the toughest. We're coming through the heart of the Pyrenees to get to the line. Well, for the last 9 days, Lance Armstrong and indeed all of the pre-race favourites have remained somewhat anonymous, but that hasn't stopped Lance making a few notes. Here he is now assessing his main rivals and also the chances he has himself.
But there's no doubt he's a serious contender. He's anybody with talent like that and experience. He's won the Tour de France before. He's been second 2 times. He's a young kid, but he has a whole lot of experience. So of course he's a favorite, and his team is, I think the last time I checked, they're the #1 team in the world. So there's plenty of depth. Alex is going to be a threat. He's going to be a factor in the race because he has the talent, he has experience. I raced with him in Dauphiné. I saw him. I know that he's strong. He has a strong team. He could win. He's clearly the best climber in the world, and this tour is a lot harder and has a lot more mountains than he did last year. So it's yeah, he's a threat. It's can he put it all together for 3 weeks and climb consistently? I don't know what he's been doing. He hasn't raced in a month, so Giro form isn't. How does it transfer to this? I don't know, but we have to keep an eye on him, and it's something that there's not an individual time trial before the mountains, so he won't be at a deficit trying to make up time. He will, you know, technically he could have the yellow jersey going into the last time trial, and the time trialists could be trying to make up time. You get into the Alps and climbs like the Madeleine, like Jouplan, Courchevel, Morzine. Those are hard climbs. They're a lot harder than what we did last year, and the stages are the stage to Briançon, 250 kilometers over the Izoard just before the finish. It's a heavy course, and so you know, we'll find out if I'm a balanced rider or if I can truly climb in the high mountains.
And the action today coming to you from a wet and dreary Pyrenees here. It's the only day the riders are in the Pyrenees, and they are far from happy because on this 205 kilometers ride from Dax to the top of Hautecam, just outside the city of Lourdes, the rain is falling steadily. The riders having left Dax in the rain, and a couple of little bits of respite, but since then it's come down again. But it hasn't deterred an initial attack coming from Jackie Giron, who got clear after 32 kilometers. He was joined about 8 kilometers later by the Spanish rider Javier Otoya and Nico Matin of Belgium, and the biggest gap, 17 minutes and 30 seconds over the field as they passed through the feeding zone at 95 kilometers. But it's good to see that Banesto have come out with some sort of a plan here. They haven't had a great season, but in fact they are trying now to establish them as a force to be reckoned with in the Tour de France. They're one of the few teams who've got 2 likely candidates with Jose Maria Jimenez, who certainly was riding well just before this tour started, but like many of the big names, we haven't seen him since the tour did start, so we don't know quite what his good condition is like right now.
Well, another big name being dropped from the main pack here. In fact, Tom Steels, the man who took out the first 2 flat stages of the Tour de France, he also has been dropped behind. They'll soon be forming at the back of the race field, the Autobus, as the man at the front here is going to go over the top and get maximum points at the Col de Marie Blanc.
So a good climb then by the Kelme rider, getting his own back after all the pain they've caused him to suffer on the flat roads. And I think he's going to probably wait there for Nico Matin, because no point in going on alone at this stage. The bunch is thinning out, Paul. We're getting down to about 40 riders here.
Well, another attack going off the front there from Team Polti. I would think the Polti rider in the middle of the group there is going to be Richard Virenque. We haven't heard his name too much on race radio at the moment, but he shouldn't be put into difficulty on this first climb of the race.
Just trying to catch a glimpse of the yellow jersey of the Tour, Alberto Eli. Don't see him there in that initial shot, but I think he's pretty much there. Back together on the way down. Sorry about the pictures. We're going to have a few problems, I think. We're in the woods as well, which doesn't help with the links that go up to the aircraft above the race. But here we have Matan has come back up to the Spanish rider. He knew he'd wait, and now they'll head off across the valley. The next one, they'll go down to Larens, and there's a sprint down there. Then we're back onto the climbs with the Col d'Aubisque.
Another move, trying to get a little sortie off the front of the main field there. That looked like a rider from the Seiko team. He's only got about 40 or 50 meters off the front at the moment. But you can see the main field has reduced in size sensibly. No major attacks yet, Phil, coming from the big contenders. They will wait until the latter part of the race. We might get a couple of tests of the waters on the ascent of the Col de l'Aubisque, but I reckon the big fight will really come on this final climb up to the finish here at Hautecam. The man going off the front here for Polte, in fact, is Pascal Hervé, who wears 156, and he will be looking to get into a small breakaway group off the front of the main field to be of help to Richard Virenque later in the stage. There's the summit banner indicating 1 kilometer to go. So Pascal Hervé has put in a fairly fine performance here on the early slopes of the first mountain of the day.
Well, we've got Hoy back in. Sandstad rather, we think must have gone over the top of the climb already, and it's going to be Botero and Hervé racing out 5th and 6th to the top of the mountain.
Hervé is riding a very strange race here. He's looking back over his shoulder all of the time. He really wants to know what sort of reaction is going to come in the main field, and he's looking back to see if Richard Virenque is coming forward. He wants to check and make sure the position of the Frenchman, because he wouldn't want to take the points away from his challenge to try and take that King of the Mountains competition again.
Well, it's almost as if he's a reluctant boy on the attack there, Pascal Hervé, as we see riders now.
It's Frankie Hoy, the man who was caught in the middle. He's about to get caught by the group of favourites. The next man coming through there is Mancebo, and these riders have got a nice advantage over the group of contenders for the Tour de France at the moment. They're all pretty content to just watch each other and stay together until we come to the bigger mountains later in the day. Well, these two riders, Phil, they actually have kept a fair amount of their advantage, because over the summit there, they still have an advantage of 13 minutes over the rest of the main field. So they're doing a good job. They've only lost 4 minutes on that climb, so I don't think the major contenders yet have really turned up the gas.
No, it's good, because they came to the start at 16:20, so a very good climb by Ochoa. He's only lost 3 minutes to the main part of the peloton on the climb of the mountain. That's very, very good. This man now, who's had trouble with his knee since a bad crash on the right of our picture in the Tour of Germany last year, Michele Bartoli, has come back with a win just before the Tour started in the Giro d'Italia. That looks like Virenque sprinting 4th and just snicking a couple of points. I think he's gone over in 7th.
Welcome back to Tour Plus, our extended coverage of the Tour de France action. Every day we try and bring you a featured rider, and as we head into the mountains, here's one man we're likely to see a lot of today. Fernando Escartín was born in Biesas in Spain 32 years ago. He measures in at 1.74 meters and 63 kilograms. He's actually been professional since 1990. With 25 wins to his career, the early part of that career was spent as a domestique for Tony Rominger, but he soon learned that on the big mountain passes he was often stronger than the Swiss leader. He's ridden the Tour de France 9 times, but over the last 4 years he's been the most consistent man in the overall standings. In 1997 he was 5th, 4th overall in 1998 when he withdrew with all the other Spanish teams in a protest. He was 3rd in the Tour de France last year. At the moment he's 100th overall, almost 12 minutes behind the leader, but everything shows he's in perfect condition for the big challenge this year.
And conditions on the Col d'Aubisque are very similar to that on the climb of the Marie Blanc here. This is the main part of the peloton, riding some 15 minutes still behind a number of riders out front now. None of them the likely candidates for final victory in Paris, but they are causing a number of surprises. Mainly all of the projected favourites still in this big bunch, and including the yellow jersey of Alberto Eli Paul, because on the descent of the Marie Blanc, he has got back into this group.
Well, you can see this group has actually swollen in numbers since the Col de Marie Blanc. A lot of riders really taking risks on the descent to pull themselves back into the front part of the main field. This main field, though, Phil, I feel once we start climbing more up to the summit of the Col de l'Aubis will explode once again, because the weather conditions out here really have been atrocious. It's only around about 6 or 7 degrees Celsius over the top of some of these mountain passes, and it's not much more than 14 or 15 in the valley roads below.
2 more riders have given up that we know of. Meyer from the Seiko team has gone, and he's taken with him his teammate. I'm surprised at this one, Dario Pieri. He's also abandoned the Tour, and sadly for the Crédit Agricole team, out with a crash in the ambulance is Jonathan Vaughters, crashing on the descent of the Col de Marie Blanc, and he crashed out last year as well. Well, swinging off the front of the main group here now, having done a stalwart job as a pacemaker, is the young newcomer to the US Postal Service, Stefan Gergaard. He's now done his job and he's fallen back, and he's left the rest of the strongmen of the team to keep up the tempo. But we've lost now, I think it's 5 riders that we know of out of the Tour today.
And before the end of the day, I reckon we'll lose an awful lot more. There is Marco Pantani, the man who was really looking to try and shine again when we got into this final climb of the day. But you can see who feels that he can win the Tour de France, because on the front of the main field, Lance Armstrong has put all of his teammates. Right there in first position is Cédric Vasseur, a man who many years ago was a leader of the Tour de France and wore the yellow jersey before it was ripped off his back almost by Jan Ullrich. But you can see this is a drilled squad now. They've sat down in the main field for a long time, in fact 9 days since we left the very first stage of the Tour de France and the individual time trial of Futuroscope, and now they're coming into their own. This is the mountain terrain, and this is where the Tour de France is won or lost.
Well, let me give you an update of the riders we know are ahead. Our cameras are concentrating here on the main part of the peloton, because that's where we expect to see the counter moves coming from. But as we start the climb here of the Aubis, we're a couple of kilometres up. It's still out front is Ochoa, Javier Ochoa. He's dropped again Nico Martin. And then the third man on the road at around about 7 minutes behind is Jackie Durand, and that despite a fall himself on the descent of Marie Blanc. Then we've got Michael Sandsted, who's been on his own for the whole of the day so far in 4th. Salvatore Camesso is in a group of 3 with Botero and Manthabo of Banesto. They're 12 minutes 40 back. Odriozola and Verheyen, the rider who was in the break the other day, they are next at 13 minutes, and they're joined by Pasquale Larente in the same group. Then Pascal Hervé moved away towards the end of the climb of the Marie Blanc. He's on his own, almost 14 minutes down. And then comes a group of George Hincapie, Antonio Tauler, and Paolo Salvadelli, and Britain's David Miller. They are in a group some 14 minutes behind the leader, while the peloton are just over 15. But back into the group now, this very select little group, as they continue the climb. Look at the face of Ullrich. We've seen that face a few times over the years in the Tour de France, and it usually means he's in very determined mood. And I think that Lance Armstrong possibly now has only 2 men alongside him from the team.
The man on the front is Giuseppe Guerini, winner last year of the Alpe d'Huez stage. The white jersey there of Banesto is Zülle. This is Virenque in the middle, bobbing out of his saddle all of the time, the climber from France. And Ullrich himself looking very concentrated. Armstrong in the black and whitish jersey there in the middle has certainly used his teammates a little foolishly, I think, on the early slopes of the climb, maybe over-assuming on the strength of his squad, because now the only 2 men who could be remaining in this group to help him will be Tyler Hamilton and Kevin Livingstone.
As Richard Virenque going through, and then there's Michael Bogart here. There's a real good chance today, this Dutch rider. But I don't know whether he's got the form, Paul. There's a big question mark on Bogart. He's having not a good season. Last year he had a brilliant season, came to the Tour de France, and it was a disaster for him. Maybe he's going to reverse the trend this year. This is him here, having had a poor start to the season. Maybe it's now he's going to come good.
Well, one other rider who's the big star of the Tour de France, Abraham Olano. I haven't caught a glimpse of him. We haven't heard from Race Radio whether or not he's been left behind, but this, for the moment, is a very large group of riders, still around about 25 men. Alex Zülle will be very happy, though, by the performance of his teammate here, number 15, Jose Maria Jimenez. He's out on the attack, putting all of the other leaders under a certain amount of pressure.
There's Hervé on the multicolours at the back of this little group now, further up the climb, looking to see. He's always looking behind, and he is expecting to see sooner or later the arrival of Richard Virenque, his teammate. But at the moment, Virenque is a captive of that group.
Well, Fernando Escartín certainly had to do something very special on a day like this, which is why as soon as the slopes started to get difficult, he went out and launched the attack. The main group, the main contenders at the moment, Phil, are very content just to watch each other and mark each other. and you can see that the breakup really is quite awful. It's because we're not able to use the helicopters out on the course at the moment, and the reason that we are actually getting these pictures is because they're being beamed up to a fixed wing aeroplane flying more than 10,000 feet up.
Well, let's hope he can locate the race below him through the cloud, because it is getting pretty bad down there. The headlights are on the vehicles now, and remember, what goes up has to come down, and that is when the danger bells will ring. We've already had at least 4 riders fall on the descent of the Marie Blanc. One of them, Jonathan Waters, reportedly in the ambulance and out of the Tour de France. I'll give you a little roundup, but I'll be honest with you now, it's getting rather difficult to know exactly who is in the front on today's stage in the Tour de France. Our computer is got blue smoke coming out of it here, but Ochoa, we haven't seen anything of him, is still ahead, and then he's being chased by Nico Matan. They were the 2 men that started all this chaos many kilometres ago now. Then there is a group of Francisco Mancebo, John Odriozola, 2 Banesto riders there, then another Kelme rider, Santiago Botero, a Seiko rider, Daniel Atienza, and 2 of the Seiko boys have abandoned today, by the way, and the Lotto rider Gert Verheyen. Then we've got George Hincapie, Pasquale Lorente, Antonio Tauler, and Salvatore Camesso, and David Miller was in that group as well, but I think he's in a little bit of trouble.
I think David Miller has actually been picked up by the group of the main contenders here. I caught a glimpse of a tall, lanky Cofidis rider, and that can only be David Miller. He's in around about 15th position at the moment, and riding in his first Tour de France with a certain amount of authority alongside some of the great names of the sport of international cycling.
I think also Gert Verheyen has long since left the company at the front.
Problem
There's been a
here.
crash here, is there? No,
this is
change
Pascal
of bike.
Hervé who's had a problem. Very quickly changed of machines there by his team mechanic, who was right up alongside there. He hasn't got too much to worry about. He's at the front of the bike race at the moment, around about roughly 10th place on the road. But his major concern really is the position of Richard Virenque.
I think that was a planned change, because we saw Polti team car stopping earlier, and that might be while he was looking around, because he had a problem. But we've now got an attack from the front of the group by Virenque, and here he is trying to ride away now from that group. This has to come sooner or later, I think. And we know that Lance Armstrong now has been left alone in that group. All of his teammates have been dropped at the minute.
This has been completely planned, because in fact he's right on the back wheel of Hervé already.
Absolutely.
They've both changed to lighter machines, and they're going to try and do something pretty special here on the Col de l'Aubisque. Now, he was obviously looking over his shoulder all of the time, waiting for this move by Richard Virenque, which is why he wasn't really insisting in the breakaway that he was in there, Phil. He wanted to be there as a leapfrog for Richard Virenque, and now he will give his all to try and open up their advantage over the main group.
This is the leader of the Tour de France at the moment on the road, as he's about 3 kilometres from the summit. And it looks like, in fact, he's coming up to the summit here, and he is, of the Col d'Aubisque. So he has a lead of some 4 kilometres over the principal bunch, which contains Lance Armstrong and Jan Ullrich. But this group has got away from that bunch now and contains Richard Virenque and Fernando Escartín and Jimenez. So 3 very good riders in this group, and they are riding ahead of the Ullrich-Armstrong pack.
Polti obviously had a plan too, because that was a very clever move just a few moments ago. Pascal Hervé, since he'd been in front of the race, was consistently looking over his shoulder, waiting and looking back to see if he could see the shape of Richard Virenque coming up through the clouds and the mist. And once he did, he just opened up the throttle and accelerated away, dragging Virenque up to that leading group there, where in fact they joined Fernando Escartín and Jose Maria Jimenez, the Banesto rider, as well. Lotto, Phil, must be pretty happy, because they've got their overall man up here in this group as well. Mario Ertz is the rider in the red and black jersey of Lotto, the leader of the Belgian squad, really a man who in the past has really revealed himself fairly well here at the Tour.
Well, here we are now with Ullrich in the second place here, being paced by Guerini. David Miller was up the road. He was caught by this group, and I'm not sure whether he's still in here. If he is, he's right on the back of it. But certainly it is a very, very select bunch of riders now, as they try to limit their losses, because they've watched riders go off the front and form a group ahead, and they haven't been able to react to it. On the lower slopes of the climb, it did look as though Lance Armstrong's team had control of the day, but one by one they have been jettisoned, and only Armstrong is out. Now, as we're looking up here, we're looking back at Mario Ertz here, And I can tell you, which isn't good news, we've had problems with horses in single-day races this year, including Gent-Wevelgem, when one knocked Eric Zabel off. Well, there's now one been reported loose on the descent of the Col d'Aubisque. Well, if they haven't got enough problems with the wet, slippery roads, Paul, the last thing we want to see now is a horse running loose down the mountain. Let's hope they can do something about that.
Well, let's hope somebody can get out there and catch it. This is the group of the major contenders in there. Christophe Moreau, that's why earlier on in the day we saw a bike change coming from Laurent Madouas to the man who is now becoming the leader of the Festina squad out on the road. And this group really has been whittled down over the last 4 or 5 kilometers. And you're right, US Postal did an awful lot of work, Phil, at the bottom of this climb, and it got rid of a lot of members of other teams as well, because even Jan Ullrich only has one teammate with him for help there, but he's got a very good one in the name of Giuseppe Guerini, the winner last year of the stage at the Alpe d'Huez.
Mario Ertz here, a little pack on his back there for his lunch, but he's no time to eat it, as he tries his racing cape actually, as he tries now to limit his losses because he's just cracked here. As he comes up towards the group, I think in fact he's about 2 kilometers from the summit here, and he's just about to lose contact. But he is a very good climber, especially for a Belgian, and don't get too many good climbers from Belgium. And it looks as though David Miller now, just as he did in the route to Sud, has lost ground towards the end of the big mountain in the Pyrenees, and he's lost contact with the Armstrong group.
Well, the last few names that I was given from the group of the main contenders, in fact there is a Cofidis rider in that group, but in fact it is David Miller's teammate, David Moncouty, the French rider. So looks as if David Miller took us somewhat of an advantage on the early slopes of the Col de l'Aubisque, and now he's been caught up by the group and probably left behind. But for David Miller, today really is a question of experience. He's learning about the Tour de France after having led the race for the first 3 days.
Gosh, what a day to go out and have to learn your Tour de France, because that is a shame. Here's Moncoutier further down the climb here, talking to his team car, I think, as now we're coming up towards the top of the climb here, and in fact that is Nico Matan, the other Cofidis rider. So he looks absolutely shattered here, Paul, but he's still going over the top in second place, but 4 minutes and 3 seconds behind the leader of the race on the road, Achoya. Well, we're nearly at the top, and thankfully we can still see the riders, which is a great bonus, because the cloud is also clearing miraculously from the final climb of the day, which is the climb of Otakam. They're still on the descent of the Col d'Aubisque. They make a change of direction. They have to climb over the top of the Col de Soulor before they come down to start the final climb.
1 kilometer to go for this group of climbers here, Phil, and what a remarkable movement it has been. Really, they have come out and played on the first time they've come into their little playground. The playground of the climbers is the slopes of the Pyrenees, and what a day to do it. The weather conditions have been absolutely appalling. It's freezing out on the course of the Tour de France today, but these guys certainly knew they've got to take every occasion if they want to dethrone the big leaders.
Well, take heart. In 2 days' time they'll be in Provence and having a day off, and unless the weather's gone completely crazy, they can reckon they'll have nice warm sunshine. As we're watching here, Pascal Hervé keeping the tempo. Beltran is here as well, and this little group are climbing nice and steady now, free of the stop-go tactics of the earlier parts of the climb as they find their rhythm. Don't expect to see Hervé on the front when it gets to the top though, but I'm just looking where Richard Virenque is, Paul. I don't spot him at the minute. Oh, there he is, tucked in there. So he's still in this group behind Jimenez, and Virenque will be looking for a finish and a few points over the top.
He's quite happy at the moment just to sit in this group and allow his teammate Pascal Hervé to do all of the work. But I reckon some of the guys in that group behind will take a few risks on the descent off the Col de Soulor, Phil, because they will possibly see the chance of riding themselves back up to the group of climbers. Men like Jan Ullrich and Lance Armstrong are daredevil descenders, and in conditions like this you can bridge 3 or 4 minutes if you take a few risks on a descent off these big mountains.
Well, it doesn't really bear thinking about going down these mountains with a horse reportedly running loose on the descent of the Aubisque and the rain taking care of the rest. It really is going to be a very hazardous descent for everybody, and the back markers will take risks because they know that they can get themselves back into the action if they take 1 or 2 on the descents.
Well, over the summit of the Col de l'Aubisque, and these guys are not too far away from it right now. They don't really have the initial descent as you would do off most of the big climbs. They drop down onto a false flat which links the Col de l'Aubisque to the summit of the Col de Soulor, and that's then when they will start the big maneuver of the descent on the way down. Richard Virenque, though, Phil, can sense now that there are points available at the top of this climb here, and he's moving forward to go over the line when we reach the summit and try and get himself as many points as possible, because for him, one of his major goals, apart from trying to win this bike race, is also to take the King of the Mountains competition for a 6th time.
Well, gone is everybody in between now. This is the race for 3rd place at the top of the Col d'Aubisque. Over the top has gone Ochoa. Matan has gone over 4 minutes after him. And I think we're going to see around 8 or 9 minutes for the appearance here of the Virenque group. And Richard Virenque, the King of the Mountains, 5 times in the last 6 years, is now looking to join the greats as one of only 3 riders who would have won the title on 6 occasions. I'm not so sure he'll be given an easy ride, though, because Ochoa is getting himself into the leader's jersey tonight.
Well, Ochoa should be the man getting maximum points out on the roads, and this man caught in the middle of nowhere here, I would think, is Paolo Savardelli. We'd actually forgotten about him because this race really has been all over the place, and it's interesting to note that it really has been an aggressive stage so far, Phil. People have been out attacking all of the time. These small bags that are being handed up by the team helpers at the moment, they will in fact probably contain warm drinks, warm tea that they've prepared especially for this situation.
Yes, in fact, there are still some survivors. We forgot about Little Camesso and Mantabo and Botaro, because they've gone over 10 minutes down, but the Virenque group is almost on them now.
This is the Bobby Julich group here, the group of Jan Ullrich and Lance Armstrong. Julich just at the back there in the Crédit Agricole jersey, in the white shirt with the green shorts.
Well, Mario Ertz has gone over at 11 minutes, the back of the leader. The Virenque group's gone over 10.5 minutes behind the leader. And we're waiting to see what time gap it is for Lance Armstrong's group. There they are, just under 12 minutes is the gap from the group containing Lance Armstrong.
This is the lone leader now. He's on the slopes in between the 2 big mountains. Col de l'Aubisque has been passed by Javier Ochoa. He's now on his way, Phil, to the Col de Soulor.
So as he goes on this rather false flat on the Col d'Aubisque, Javier Ochoa still leads on the day in the Tour de France. Nico Matan, looking a bit shaky, is second at 4 minutes. And then comes a small group now being joined by Richard Virenque. They are around 10.5 minutes back. Armstrong's group 1.5 minutes back of them at approximately 12 minutes. And so there are big splits today in the Tour.
It seems as if, in fact, Michele Bartoli has had a problem on one of the corners here on the Col de l'Aubisque, but he's actually back up and riding again sensibly as we approach 1 kilometer to go to the summit of the Col de Soulor for this man Javier Ochoa, who's been leading this bike race over all of the major climbs so far today. And if they don't do something dramatic behind, he could be riding himself to a very good victory here at the summit of Hautacam.
Well, let's hope that he can do this. He's still 11.5 minutes ahead of Lance Armstrong's group on the road today and riding superbly. Nico Matan, we believe now, has been picked up by the chasers, Francisco Mancebo and Santiago Botero, and so he has got company, although I think Matan is in terrible trouble now. His legs have gone and he's still got to go over the top of the finishing climb, of course. Now, let's have a look here. It's time to grab a little bag here before they start the long descent. And apparently Richard Virenque has also put in an attack now as well.
Well, that's the sort of move I would expect Richard Virenque to make, but I would have thought he would wait until he got to the descent off the Col de Soulor, because the climb, in between the 2 climbs, Phil, the Col de l'Aubisque and the Soulor, is not really an ideal place to make an attack. And certainly if you want to take risks on a long descent, he should have waited 3 or 4 kilometers further to attack on the descent from Soulor down into the valley below. This is what you can see. This is what all of the Pyrenean climbs are like. They're so scary. You see, there's no protection at all at the side of the road here. And if you do happen to go around to one of these corners and you lose it, the best thing to do is to drop the bike as quickly as possible and hope that just by sliding on your backside you can start slowing yourself down, because if you do go over the edge, it really does plummet right down into the valleys below.
It's only a short descent, as you can see here now, the leader going over the top of the Col de Soulor. And it's a short descent and then a little stabby climb of a couple of kilometres, and you're over the top, still hovering at 1,400 metres above sea level here. Now he begins the plunge away from the big mountains in the heart of the Pyrenees as he swings down towards the little town of Argelès-Gazost, and there he will start the final climb to Hautecam. He's still a way to go yet before he'll feel as though he's won today's stage of the Tour.
But he's still got around about 20 kilometres of descent, Phil, before he gets down into that town of Argelès-Gazost, and then he's got that 13-kilometre climb up to the finish. And behind, the attacks will certainly start to come now. One or two riders will take risks off the summit of the Soulor, and I didn't think the Richard Virenque's group really had that much of an advantage really over the Armstrong-Ullrich group, and those guys who are very big, strong descenders may well find themselves closing in on the climbers on this descent.
No change in the weather as we go down though, Paul. Let's look at that now as the riders, or the leader, starts the descent. Some hairpin bends on this descent too down the Obisque, so he really does want to take it a little bit easy, but at the same time he's thinking, if I can just hold the way to the next climb, I'll get away from them. And he will know the time checks, but not very often, unfortunately, because nobody can get up alongside him, especially on these descents, which are far too dangerous to try and reach the rider.
Well, on stages like this, normally the riders on the dry races will actually have their tyres pumped up to 8 or 9 atmospheres, but on a day like this they will have them quite a bit softer, knocking them up to around about 6.5 to 7 atmospheres. The reason for that is because if you have them too hard on a descent like this, they really become very slippery indeed. And the speed that this man is going downhill, I would think he was very attentive this morning, Phil, to his tyre pressures. We are looking at the second group being 10 minutes 18 seconds behind on the road. That is behind Xavier Ochoa, and 2 minutes further back is the group of Lance Armstrong and Jan Ullrich. This is the very tricky part of the Col de l'Aubisque. It's been a dramatic scene of some most magnificent photographs taken of the Tour over the past years. The great history of the Tour de France has been written on these slopes, and now we can see, I think this is probably, Phil, the group of Jan Ullrich and Lance Armstrong as they go into the tunnel. A brief respite away from the rain, but not for really very long. The second group on the road is this one. There is Pascal Hervé. He's in the group here, but as you can see, Richard Virenque certainly has flown, and he's no longer in the group with the rest of these climbers. The man at the back there, in fact, is Jose Maria Jimenez. Escartín is in here as well in the lime green shorts of the Kelme squad, and they now are almost reaching the summit as well of the Col de Soulor, and they too will begin the plummet down into the valley below in Argelès-Gazost. Richard Virenque, what a superb planned move that was by him and the Polte squad. The man at the back we're looking at right now is the man who helped him to set it up, Pascal Hervé. He was kicked out of the Tour de France in 1998 in the Festina affair while he was wearing the King of the Mountains leaders jersey. At the moment though, he's switched across to ride for Polte, having spent one year last year riding for Festina, and the reason he came to Polte was so that he could ride alongside Richard Virenque one more time in the Tour de France.
Well, Paul, I take my hat off to Nico Matan right now, because he's just gone over the top of the Col de Soulor in second place and only giving a few seconds as well. And there's the yellow jersey of Elie just coming over the top of the Col d'Aubisque, so he's a little bit away behind the leader now. 4 minutes 4 seconds was the gap for Nico Matan, and we're waiting now to see the next group there. There's Eric Zabel in this back group as well, along with the yellow jersey of Elie. I think he's losing that jersey now, but to who? Well, we're not quite sure yet, because there are so many riders out on the attack. But in second place, the second group rather, of Mancebo, Botero and Virenque, they will be approaching the top of the Col de Soulor very shortly, and I reckon that they will be closing in on the two front runners.
Well, there's going to be a serious calculation trying to figure out who's going to lead this bike race at the end of the day, because looking down the list of riders who started the day in the top 10 places, I'd be surprised if many of them are still in with a chance of taking or keeping the yellow jersey today. Alberto Elie there, Phil, was an awful long way behind. I haven't seen very much of Fabrice Gougot or even Mark Wouters. Pascal Chanteur in fourth position certainly will have disappeared, and it may well be a day for a man like Jose Luis Arrieta to cause a surprise. But this man from Mercatoni Uno has decided he's not going to take any risks of taking his hand off the handlebars on the descent, and he's going to keep himself as warm as possible, because on the descents, Phil, it really does get very cold. The chill factor is phenomenal.
It really, really is, and very wise decision there. Riders stopping and putting their coats on. because they're not going to win the stage, and it makes sense to wrap up for the descent. Otherwise, on the last climb today, you'll lose even more time. But now the front runners of the Tour de France today are over the top of the Col de Sulor and heading down towards the valley before the last climb of the day. Javier Ochoa still heading up the race, 4 minutes 40 seconds ahead of Nico Martin. And we're now looking at the next group of 3 riders here approaching the top of the col. And Richard Virenque is going to have to keep scoring best of the rest, I think, because Ochoa is building himself quite a bag full of King of the Mountain points today.
If Ochoa gets the summit of Hautacam in first position as well, he will certainly be the leader of that competition for quite a long time to come, because he will have got some serious points in today's stage. The man in this group with Richard Virenque wearing 22 is Santiago Botero, and he really has put in a fine performance. And Martin, Phil, I really have to take my hat off to that man, because he is surviving against all odds at the moment. He's not a great climber, but in true Belgian style, he's a tough man.
Absolutely. And now Richard Virenque here setting the pace. Came out with a well thought out plan today with his mate Pascal Hervé. They've executed that plan. They didn't figure on Javier Ochoa being quite so far ahead, I don't think. And it's still a real problem for them, because that man doesn't look tired to me. He's still riding extremely well.
He's trying to recuperate as much as possible on the descent and hopefully take on board plenty of food and fuel to keep himself topped up. You use an awful lot more calories on a stage like this as well, because not only are you producing the effort to actually keep your bike going forward, you're using calories to actually keep yourself warm on the bike as well. The Banesto rider in this group here, Phil, with Richard Virenque is Mancebo. He was a man in one of those earlier attacks up the road. So now we're looking, the race situation should be Ochoa, Martin, and then this group here with Mancebo, Richard Virenque, and then Botero.
Here goes Richard. Nobody going to have the strength to challenge him as he chases up to the mountain. I think he's third over the top, but I believe they've swept up everybody in the team inside in the last couple of kilometres. So Virenque goes over third, and I think just pipping for second was probably Botero.
Now he's going to start the descent now of this second category climb, the Col de l'Aubisque, and he will take an awful lot of risks. He wants to try and put time as well, not only between himself and Armstrong and Ullrich, but also between himself and the other climbers, the climbers who are in the group behind, and that is in fact Fernando Escartín and Jose Maria Jimenez. But the organization is actually coming into this group now, because you can see Jan Ullrich has given the nod to his teammate Giuseppe Guerini to go forward, set the tempo on this easier part of the climb in between the two summits of the Aubisque and the Sulor, and they really are hammering along.
Well, Escartín's headed up the rest now, got over the top of the mountain in 6th place, 9 minutes 21 seconds down and 25 seconds behind the group being led by Richard Virenque. So they may get back together.
Well, Armstrong is comfortably in this group. Nardello is in the group as well there, with Zülle going through there. Marco Pantani in the pink is the next man to go through, and Michele Bartoli, who earlier was seen on the attack, has also been picked up by this group. So this is a pretty serious group of some of the major names here at the Tour de France, and Pantani riding sensibly right now, Phil, because he's letting the other guys do all of the work, and he's going to sit back and wait until the final climb of the day. There's no riders from, none of the leaders from Once here, but in fact David Echevarria is 3 from the back there. You can see him with the Once squad name on his back there. But his 2 leaders, the men who earlier in this tour were looking like big contenders for the overall win, Olano and Jalabert, well, they're absent.
Well, it's rather, I'm just wondering if that's David Miller on the back. It looks like his star, but I think it's his mate David Moncoutier who's just tagged on the back. As coming up from the rear here is Bobby Julich as well. Bad news for him today with the loss of Jonathan Waters in a crash on the Col de Marie Blanc. And these riders now coming up over the top of the climb. And that's the Col de Sulor. And they are 10 minutes 30 seconds down on the leading rider. So they haven't gained hardly a thing after the climb of the Aubisque.
Well, they're around about 1.5 minutes behind Richard Virenque, which is the sort of deficit that could be made up on this very tricky descent off this mountain. And I think we may well see 1 or 2 riders trying to push it forward a little bit to try and reduce the advantage that Virenque has at the moment. But Virenque does have himself in a pretty good situation, Phil, because he's with Botero and Mancebo. and so they will be able to share the pacemaking on this descent. The first part of the descent is a descent where you actually have to use a pretty big gear. It's not quite that technical, and you can keep the pace fairly high. But in these conditions, you have to be so careful not to overshoot a corner, because if you do, you'll drop down quite a few feet. Well, Virenque is getting some last-minute information from the team management up alongside him here. They just brought him a drink to keep him topped up with his fuel, and unfortunately he's actually losing an awful lot of impetus, because he's getting information that the group of Escartín is coming up from behind, and in fact the group of Armstrong is also closing in pretty rapidly. So we could see a general regrouping of all of these groups, Phil, right at the bottom of the last climb of the day.
What is happening here, all of these cars have got to move out of the way. The group is coming up, and in fact the team car, the Polti team, is slowing down and causing the junction to catch his own man, because they are right in the convoy of cars, and there they are. So Escartín and the boys are back up now. At the moment they are racing here for third place, but off go the Kelme again.
Well, these guys will work as hard as they can.
This will be Heras, I would think.
They certainly must knock it off a little bit now, Phil, because they've got a man up the road at the moment, although they won't be too worried about chasing him down, because his advantage on the road is so huge that even his own teammates can't really pull him back.
That's the Armstrong group there now, and they are under 20 kilometres to go. So they're approaching the last climb. There's not a big gap between the two groups now.
20 kilometres to go for this Armstrong group. Still on the front, just one man doing the work, and that is Giuseppe Guerini. But I'm pretty certain this group will smash to pieces once we get onto the slopes of Hautecam. But the major contenders, Phil, today really, as you said earlier, have been pretty happy just to watch each other. It's the climbers who've gone out onto the attack. It's the climbers who've tried to shine on their terrain. And really, it'll be interesting now to line up Jan Ullrich, Zülle, Alano, Armstrong and Pantani on this final climb of the day. Pantani, I think, will, as soon as we get to the bottom of this climb, launch an attack, because he needs to put a couple of minutes between himself and Armstrong and Ullrich before we get to the next mountain stages.
Could well be. Here is Virenque sitting at the back of his little group. And at 1:10 behind comes Lance Armstrong's group with all of the stars. They could be back up here before the finish.
Well, it's been an awful hard ride here for Escartín and his boys. At one time, they were almost 3 minutes ahead of Lance Armstrong's group on the road, and the Armstrong-Ullrich group really are closing it down, and they really appear to have timed it to perfection. They're around about 1 minute now, and they may well just make the junction at the bottom of the climb.
Well, as we look here at Richard Virenque about to start the climb of Hautecam, I understand you may be getting a little bit of disrupted commentary from Paul Sherwin and myself. I'm sorry about that, but I should imagine water is in the system somewhere now, because it has been a very, very wet day in the Pyrenees. I'm amazed that we've managed to keep the pictures so well and so clear. A great tribute to the technicians out there on the course.